Welcome to ACP, the Amazon Connect podcast. This is the show that focuses on Amazon Connect and related technologies. I'm your host, Tom Morgan, and I'm joined as usual by my co-host, AWS Solution Architect and Contact Center Consultant, Alex Baker. Find out more about Cloud Interact by visiting us at cloudinteract.io. It's time for another ACP, and I'm joined in person by Alex. Alex, good to see you.
Hi Tom, good to see you.
It's been a little while since we've been in person, I feel like, but yeah, always good to get together. And I know you've got some interesting news items to go through. So without any further ado, let's get straight into things that you've spotted.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm always slightly unsure now where we're at in terms of the release date of the podcast compared to the actual release notes
all over the place in a well-oiled machine that's careering around the interwebs.
But I guess if we just cover them off at some point, then at least we've done that. The ones that I was going to mention today, the first one is that there are some new metrics available in the historical metrics page. Probably too many to go through one by one, so encourage everyone to take a look at the Amazon Connect admin documentation. But for a couple of examples, we've got abandonment, if I can say it, rate is one of the first ones that's mentioned, and agent non-response without customer abandons. They're the first couple mentioned. I'm sure they'll be quite useful for a couple of people.
Agent non-response without customer abandons. So what is that? I've stayed on the line waiting and no one's picked it up.
That one, as I understand it, is we're trying to detect sort of work avoidance perhaps from agents. The agent hasn't responded and answered the call, but you can also tell that the customer hasn't abandoned the call, whereas I think before it was a bit of a grey area.
Oh, I see.
But yeah, now it should be quite straightforward to tell that it was the agent that has kind of ignored a call that they should have been answering.
Got it. That's good. Well, that's helpful.
We've also got some new APIs for Amazon Connect cases, and they will allow you to upload attachments, check the details of attachments, and then delete attachments on cases. And then we have, and this one, it has been in preview for a while. It's nice to see it coming into general availability, but we've got some new metrics and reporting around flow analytics. It should allow you to measure things like time in contact flows, flow outcomes, and just keep an eye on trends and perhaps emerging issues within your contact flows.
Oh, that's interesting. So almost like the performance of your contact center configuration, if you like, how your different flows are set up, whether some are way longer than others and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And beforehand, you could do it if you built something yourself, but it's quite nice that it's come into the Amazon Connect portal, so it's just there at your fingertips if you haven't yet sort of developed a custom reporting solution.
Well, that's a good roundup. It's good to see things sort of progressing. It's always good, to see the product evolving and, new things being worked on, and especially things like the APIs, I think, because that really helps, obviously, helps the ecosystem, right? It helps people build new things, especially for something like Connect cases. Yeah, so that's good. All right, so this week we are going to be talking all about quality monitoring. But let's start off with what is quality monitoring, because I'm not sure I fully understand.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I guess quality monitoring you might describe as the process of evaluating and assessing the performance of your agent and kind of how that relates to interactions with your customers. So effectively being able to put a sort of quality score on how your conversations between your agents and your customers are going.
Okay, so it's less about how efficient your agents are and more about the quality of the interaction that they're having with your customers?
Yeah.
Okay.
The next thing I was going to mention was some sort of key components of quality monitoring. I was going to come on to KPIs and metrics. So as you mentioned, you might have metrics, things like how long did it take for a call to be answered, which is important, possibly not necessarily within the quality monitoring context that we're talking about. So I guess different companies will adhere to different KPIs, key performance indicators. I'd see the quality monitoring context is sort of around things that you would measure the agent against. perhaps traditionally things like average handle time,
Yeah.
first call resolution.
Yeah.
Now, arguably, and I think we've spoken about this before, average handle time, it's a bit of a sort of blunt instrument by which to measure your agents on, because, does a short call mean that it's a good call?
Yeah.
Possibly not in a lot of situations.
Yes, yeah.
Some other key components of a sort of quality monitoring process would be call recordings, also maybe chat transcripts or other records of some kind of interaction, maybe an email thread. You might run sort of quality monitoring processes on all of those. QM could be done in real time, but you'd probably find typically that a supervisor or a quality analyst would be carrying this out sort of post the interaction happening.
Okay. Almost like a sample. They take a sample of the day or something, or a sample of the week, or a sample of a person. Or
Yeah. What you might find is that the QA role would have their own KPIs by which they're measured, and they might have to listen to and score maybe 4 calls per agent per month.
Right.
And that might vary depending on how many agents you have, how many QAs you have, and the types of KPIs that you have against them. But yeah, so a key thing that you need is that record of the interaction to have a look or a listen through. So a call recording probably being the one that most people associate with it. You might also have, and you might call it a scorecard or an evaluation form. That's an important component of the process. And a business might have maybe one or maybe many different forms. The quality analyst type role would be able to listen to an interaction, but at the same time work through the form, which would typically contain various sections with some questions about aspects of the interaction.
Right. So this is taking the fluffy conversation, the audio, the chat transcript, and codifying, essentially putting metrics around it, like turning it into a common set of key metrics.
Yeah.
For things like comparison or scoring or.
Yeah, exactly that. And making it, as you've implied, making it structured. So if you're measuring a person, you want to measure all your other people by that same set of criteria. So it's a fair and uniform evaluation.
Got it. And that helps with training, I guess, as well, and all these sort of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that was going to be something that I was going to come on to. Was you're right. There's the sort of, I guess, the technological aspects of it. So things like your call recordings and the forms. But yes, if you're gonna bother to do this and score the forms, you would expect that there would be some kind of feedback loop involved as well. So you want to take the feedback and you want to act upon it somehow. So perhaps you want to highlight some great interactions, praise agents that have driven a particularly good outcome for a customer, or I've seen it where particularly high scoring calls have then been used as a sort of a benchmark for training. So you might say that Tom's done a great call. We're going to train some of our other agents because of these responses that he's given in a particular interaction. There's a couple of other points maybe to talk about on the feedback loop, but in terms of those sort of technological items for gathering the feedback, you might want to consider things like post-call surveys. So if you want to seek the feedback of the customer rather than the opinion of the scoring, the QA analyst, then you need to do that somehow. And that might be by offering your customer a survey at the end of a call. You know, the kind of thing. It's, rate from 1 to 5, how happy you were with the interaction, that kind of thing.
Yep. And that's just another set of data that feeds into the overall process, right? Because it's not that, the customer might be really happy, but they could have been told a load of rubbish, So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Around the feedback loop, we mentioned that sort of highlighting of great interactions, but equally, if you identify some knowledge gaps, so maybe an agent isn't saying a certain compliance phrase that they absolutely must say, but for legal reasons, you can highlight that kind of thing, and you can give a bit of coaching and just make sure that they're adhering to the right processes going forward. It would also be quite common within the quality team to have calibration sessions as well, where you get the quality team maybe listening to a bunch of calls that have been evaluated and checking their homework effectively, making sure that Tom is marking calls in the same way that Alex is marking calls, and you get that fair feedback across your agent base.
Yep. Yes, that makes sense. I mean, it all sounds important, and it sounds like a thing you should be doing, especially if you've got, you know, lots of different agents and they're, you know, maybe different levels of experience and all the rest of it. It does sound like a thing you should be doing, but it also sounds like quite a lot of work. Like, it sounds like a job for an entire team of extra people who's a set of checkers, if you like. So yeah, like it sounds like quite a lot to
absolutely.
take on.
Yeah, and we're talking to customers at the moment that have entire teams of people that are dedicated to this, as you might imagine, right? Because you've got agents whose sole job pretty much is taking customer service calls throughout the day. If you're going to have to evaluate, say, 4 or 5 calls per month for every single agent, yeah, you're right. It takes quite a sizable sort of base of personnel to do that.
And actually, I suppose those people have to be quite good as well. Like, they have to be quite knowledgeable. They have to be almost very good agents as well. Like, they have to know all about the process, the systems. Like, they have to know when answers that are being given are right or wrong or appropriate or inappropriate. So
yeah,
so they're not, you know, easy to find people either, I imagine.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think also when it's a consideration when you're perhaps building out those evaluation forms that we talked about, do you have some information against the question to try and explain what it is that you want to get from the question, just so that everyone can look at it and there's no ambiguity around what it is that you're trying to discover and trying to score.
Yes.
The other thing to mention as well is sort of in the legacy type environment, quite often you might find that your call recordings are in one system and then the evaluation form is in a different system. So the QA might be doing a bit of application switching, possibly a bit of copy and pasting between different systems.
Hunting down the call recording, all of that stuff. Yeah. Okay. So this is the point at which we come in and say Amazon Connect solves all of this somehow. So right. Where are we at with Amazon Connect? Because they have some quality management stuff built in, don't they? Or at least as a purchasable add-on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we should talk about pricing at some point. But so yeah, what does Connect have?
Yep. So Connect, I guess the fundamentals, those kind of technological components that we mentioned, it includes most of them out of the box, or kind of makes them easy to build yourself. For example, the call recording, we know that's native within Connect. You can just turn it on, it's there, there's no extra cost for it or anything. The call recording search portal in Connect gives you quite a flexible way of searching for calls. So for example, you can search for calls by agent name, by time and date, by customer phone number, call duration, many others. Yep. And we have seen it with a customer recently where the QAs are supposed to be evaluating calls that are over a certain duration.
Right.
So they figure that if a call is only 20 seconds long, for example, there's not really much that's sort of worth listening to and evaluating. And there's a reason that it's quite short. There's no sort of valuable interactions there.
Yep.
But what they can't do in their current system is they can't filter for those calls of a certain duration. So immediately they're pleased with the idea that Connect can search for calls sort of between 30 seconds and 10 minutes, for example.
Yes.
The next point is that the evaluation forms are native within Connect. You can build out your own forms with your sections, your questions within them, the instructions to the evaluator that we mentioned that are probably quite important for that sort of uniform approach to the scoring, and the scoring itself. So you can add scores to the questions and you can have weighting around the scoring.
Okay, that's nice. There's a place for evaluators to go and start a new form or whatever, start a new evaluation.
Exactly. Okay, and it's right there in the, so if you have evaluations enabled, if you go and search for a call, it's right there in the call recording search portal, so you can just click in there and start.
Oh, nice. So you can go from the recording to immediately go and evaluate. That's nice. Yeah.
And so the scoring, just to explain what I mean about weighted scoring, perhaps you might have one question which is particularly important, so something around compliance that the agent absolutely must say. You can have it weighted such that that question, if it's a fail, will fail the whole form, despite them doing quite well in the rest of the form. Because they didn't do that really key thing, it's a fail, and therefore it's sort of flagged immediately.
Yep, that's nice.
The next thing to mention, post-call surveys we touched upon. So if you want to go down that route of offering a post-call survey to the customers, You can build it quite easily in Connect. Maybe then with a bit of integration, perhaps using some Lambda code, you can link the survey result together with the form output, maybe do a bit of custom reporting on it and kind of get a feel all in one place for how one affects the other. Just taking the quality form in isolation maybe doesn't give you that full picture of what the customer has then fed back about the interaction afterwards.
Especially where they're very different. I suppose those are the interesting ones, aren't they? Where the thoughts of the evaluator are very different from the thoughts of the customer.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, or the agent thought it went well, but the customer then gave negative feedback. Yeah, you definitely want to follow up on that kind of thing. The next thing to mention, so because of the speech analytics capability that Amazon Connect Contact Lens brings, you might want to actually move away from the post-call survey approach of getting customer feedback, or at least sort of supplement it with the speech analytics feedback. Because Contact Lens allows you to do things like sentiment analysis, you could include the overall customer sentiment throughout the call, or you could look at sentiment trend. So, for example, did a call start off with quite a negative sentiment, but an agent managed to turn it around to a positive sentiment? That sounds like a really good outcome, or the reverse of that, obviously not so good.
Yeah.
You can also set up rules, so maybe things like compliance phrases that we mentioned, or other specific words or phrases that are being mentioned in an interaction. Maybe customer mentions that they want to make a complaint, for example. You could automatically flag that with a rule, and you can take an action off the back of the rule.
This is quite interesting, this, because it's the first steps of, and it sounds quite enticing. Like, we don't have to bother our customers anymore because we can use Contact Lens to get the essence of what they were feeling, what they were thinking, and what their general thoughts were. And I think that's kind of interesting to lots of people. I wonder if, I think where we're probably at the moment, I don't know what you think, but like maybe customers are doing a little bit of both at the moment and doing a bit of comparison of like continuing to ask the customer and then see what Contact Lens says and almost validate the Contact Lens output before they are ready to completely take away asking the customer and relying on, Contact Lens.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, isn't it? Sort of where do you see the demarcation between what the AI side of things can do versus what the agent can do, definitely. And of course, mentioning AI can do some other stuff, some of which has been introduced recently. So there's a preview running at the moment, for example, of performance evaluation, but using Gen AI to kind of give you suggestions about what the answer to a question might be. So as you're running through your evaluation form for some of the questions, and I think you can add this to up to 5 questions in a form, you get an Ask AI button, and it will give you a Gen AI powered suggestion for that particular answer, and then a bit of context and a bit of justification why that answer has been suggested.
So based on the transcript, based on the...
Yeah.
Okay. And the sentiment and all those things. That's interesting.
And it kind of, this leans on, we mentioned those evaluator instructions for the question. So you need, it's these that the Gen AI suggestion is based on. So you need to be quite careful that you include quite well structured instructions there. But yeah, it should take a look at the instructions, and it should evaluate based on the transcript what it thinks the answer is to that question, which is super cool.
It is, and maybe is that the future? If you can really well codify your evaluator instructions to the point where you don't need to be an experienced evaluator to undertake them, is this a thing you could hand off to AI?
Yeah.
In combination with Contact Lens. And then the reason for saying that is not just because then you don't have to maintain a bunch of evaluators, but actually you could evaluate 100% of your calls, couldn't you? Whereas at the moment, I imagine, I don't know, 10%. I don't know what a realistic thing is for a company, but it's not 100%, is it? So that's an interesting idea.
That's the really exciting application of it for me. It's the being able to, because it's quite a scattergun approach traditionally, isn't it? You're picking calls quite often basically at random. Whereas with these, the Contact Lens analysis and some of the other parts of the tool set, can be a lot more focused around what it is that the human QA analyst actually spend their time looking at.
And without any of the unconscious bias that I'm sure feeds into these systems, unless they're really well controlled, unless the evaluators are given calls entirely at random, by some algorithm, it's going to be very hard to avoid the unconscious bias of like, avoiding your friends, picking on people you don't like all this stuff, whether consciously or unconsciously. So actually, having AI do it is good for those reasons as well.
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing to mention around the sort of the approach towards full automation of it, you can use your contact lens analytics output combined with a set of the rules that we mentioned to have your form questions automatically completed. So almost aside from that, the Gen AI suggestion, which kind of gives you an idea of what the Gen AI engine thinks, this will, if you set the rules carefully enough, it will just automatically answer the questions. And that the way we've demoed it in the past is something like that compliance phrase one. So if you've got something that's really that important, and we mentioned it in context of the scoring weightings, if you've got one question that you absolutely have to do, like an FCA compliance phrase or something, you can set up a contact lens rule to detect whether that was read by the agent in a particular part of the call. And if it wasn't, then you can automatically have that question scored. It's not even a suggestion. It will just kind of say contact lens has marked this automatically. You can, of course, override it if you want, but I think that's really neat to kind of take the heavy lifting out of those ones where it's very cut and dry. They didn't do this, and it's absolutely vital to have it done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the combination of those two things together does give you like a very comprehensive way of evaluating all your calls, which is really interesting for the coverage. I think it's really interesting for that. I think there's a value as well to taking these evaluators that are very experienced in what good calls look like and actually freeing them from this work that they're doing at the moment means that they can go and be really good trainers. They can be excellent, they can be the kind of top tier call handlers as well. I think that's really interesting. And I don't know where this is going to end, right? Because you've got, at the moment, this is post-call analysis. You're evaluating the things that have happened. There's let's take it to the next level and say, well, actually, the compliance phrase one is a really good example, right? Because it's so cut and dried. Either it was said or it wasn't. The things like the compliance phrase, well, let's put some rules around that and say, like, not only is it required, it's required in the first 5 minutes. So, like, then what happens after 5 minutes where you've got 100% coverage? Absolutely, something could, maybe just barges into the call and be like, sorry, we've got to stop this call because we're missing a compliance phrase.
And you definitely could do that now.
Yeah,
right?
you could do that now, couldn't you?
The real-time contact lens analysis. If you have your rules set up for that compliance phrase type thing, if it is at the start of the call, then there's no reason, if the agent didn't say it at the start of the call, you couldn't have a Lambda function or something, send them an automated message to say, by the way, you haven't done your compliance phrase, make sure you mention it.
Yeah. And for some industries, it is so important that like they would probably be okay with the hit to the customer experience of an automated barge in, to be like having a robotic voice telling you that we're stopping this call because there's no compliance message, so we're going to read it out to you now. That's really
if it is that important, financial services or pharma, all sorts of potential use cases for that, definitely.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And there's other applications as well. Like we touched a little bit on training and coaching. Absolutely, this is a great way of doing it, to get that feedback early and fast. To have all of your calls evaluated and you get the results in real time before the next call is a great way to do coaching. Well, it's just like it's like having somebody experienced sitting with you and like debriefing you after every call.
Yeah.
And maybe during the call, maybe that's what's coming next, right? This real-time evaluation doesn't need always to be after the call. Like real-time coaching, why not? We've, like you say, we've got the real-time transcription. We've got the set of evaluation rules. We know what good looks like. Yeah, we could real-time, which is probably not solution ISV products that we could build like on podcasts, but like it's why not, right? Like it's
maybe we'll come back with a follow-up podcast once we've figured something out.
It.
But yeah, there's so many good use cases for it.
Yes, there really are. Yeah,
and I'm really excited about I think you mentioned some people might see it as maybe we can get rid of some of our quality analysts. unfortunately, that might be something you could foresee. But I think the opposite is true, in that give your quality analysts the tool set to be able to really use their time more
100%.
effectively.
I think it's about freeing them up from the drudgery of work. Like, evaluating other people's calls does not sound like the most fun thing once you become... It's not a great jumping off point for an experienced agent to be like, now you get to evaluate less experienced people. And that, I don't know, like, that doesn't sound great, right?
Yeah.
To be given the harder challenges of dealing with the trickiest of customers, or the most important of customers, being able to train new people up, look at the process and improve the process, those feel like valuable things to do. So I think this is good. And then this is a good use of it. This is the right use of AI then, I think, of freeing people up from repeatable work. So I think it's good.
I think you mentioned it earlier, but it's interesting, and we've got some insight to it from our customers, but is that level of trust there in the full AI tool set?
Yeah, that's the thing.
Say, let's let it deal with 100% of interactions.
Yeah. And I think we're on that journey. I'm not sure we're there yet. So yes, I think what we're seeing, and I think what we'll continue to see, is people dipping their toe in by doing it alongside and using their current process to evaluate, the new, and seeing if it's good enough. And it might not be right now, and it might be next year that it is, and the year after it's better. And, at some point, every company will be different, because the trade-off then is the spend on your non-AI way of doing it. And actually, but also there's the spend of the AI way of doing it as well. It's not free.
Of course.
So
we haven't really mentioned cost. And of course, there is some cost to it. We've mentioned a couple of the components that are optional and sort of have a cost associated. So there's the contact lens analytics. That is, like most of the Connect billing, it's consumption based. So if you turn it on, it costs a few cents per minute per transcribed and analyzed contact. Then you have the evaluation forms themselves, and this is where you start to incur a little bit more cost. So you want to, I guess we'd always suggest, doing a smaller proof of concept around this kind of thing and really nail down that business case for it. The quality forms, when you start to use them for each evaluated agent, so if you use a QM form on an agent in a month, it will cost $12. So you can start to mount that up. It's similar to in our chat around AI, where you've got things like Q in Amazon Connect. It slightly moves away from that sort of consumption-based. It is kind of consumption-based, but it's more of a sort of one-time hit of quite a big chunk of cash, rather than just the small per minute. Its
value gets better the more you use it, I suppose. It's one of those. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, there's lots to think about for quality management people. But it's exciting as well, I think, because I think probably for a lot of people, quality management is a thing that big companies do, and like it's unfeasible to think about when you've got 2 or 3 agents and everybody's maxed out, and you haven't got the money to hire somebody just to listen to all their calls and stuff like that. I feel like some of this newer stuff and the AI driven stuff is going to be really good for those people, because it allows them to do things that they can't do today because they just don't have the resource to do it. So I think that's kind of exciting for those people as well.
Yeah, totally agree.
Cool. All right.
Exciting area and lots of scope to make some improvements with the tool set you get with Amazon Connect.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it'll be fascinating to come back in 12 months' time and see what the state of QM is versus today, where it's still quite manual, but we've just got the beginnings of automation there. I think give it 12 months, it'd be really interesting to see where it's at.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, we could talk all day, but I think it's time to bring this episode to an end. Thank you very much, Alex, for your expertise around quality management, which I knew nothing about. And thank you for listening. Today, we discussed quality monitoring in the contact center. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast player. That way you won't miss it. Whilst you're there, we'd love it if you would rate and review us. And as a new podcast, if you have colleagues that you think would benefit from this content, please let them know. To find out more about how Cloud Interact can help you on your contact center journey, visit cloudinteract.io. We're wrapping this call up now, and we'll connect with you next time.